Greetings. Welcome to NAI Global's House Biz podcast. I'm your host, Gary Marsh. Our guest today is Doug Sharpe with NAI NorCal in the Silicon Valley office. Welcome, Doug.
Good morning.
It's great of you to be here, and you're on the show in part because you're one of NAI Global's top 10 producers for 2022. So congratulations on that. With some 5,000 working professionals across 4 or more continents, I'm not sure. That's quite an accomplishment. So congratulations on that note.
Well, thank you so much. That's the overnight success of 30 years in the business here in Silicon Valley. So I certainly appreciate that. And of course, I can't fully appreciate or to express my appreciation without including all of the clients and the stuff that we've done across the US and across the world. So
wonderful. Well, and you just alluded to one of my favorite expressions. It was one of my mentors when I was a reporter at the Silicon Valley Business Journal covering the real estate industry back in the early and mid 90s. This gentleman's name was Fred Hoare, and he was the communications director for National Semiconductor for many years. And he used to say, quote, "It takes a long time to become an overnight sensation." So you must have got the same memo, Doug. Good for you.
Absolutely.
Well, so you're well known in our circle of NAI Global professionals as having a pretty sizable, significant account. We're not supposed to say it by name, but we can say it's a major publicly traded energy and EV auto manufacturer. So why don't we just start with the nature of the work you've been doing? I know when we were at the Leadership Summit in Boston in October, there was a table with our colleagues from South Korea, Ray and the gang. And I know you've been doing some deals in Korea with this car company. So talk about, maybe start with Korea, since I think you've done 7, 8, 10 deals there. What's the nature of the deals? Are they office deals? Are they showrooms, plant facilities? And then just more broadly, let's go into where else you've been doing business with this one company.
Yeah, so for that particular region, there's as there is with a lot of international business, there is not only I'll just call it the sales and service front end kind of presentation to the public, but also a fairly deep and needed facilities for logistics, bringing in, vehicles or parts from other parts of the world and then introducing them into the systems in those various countries. So although the end product may end up in a showroom someplace, the getting them to the ports and getting them through the local customs and so forth, it has also been just absolutely magically done by the folks in Korea at the NAI Korea office. So
that's good to hear. So am I hearing it's a mix of industrial flex and retail type leasing that you've been doing it? And I shouldn't assume leasing. Do you sometimes buy property, or is it strictly leasing?
Yeah, so I'll just go into the kind of the overall category of that particular type of client. And in most of the companies that we work with that have products, they tend to prefer to keep their capital in the manufacturing sector or in areas that basically improve the product as far as the purchasers are concerned. If you can imagine going from 0 to 60 and throw it out there in 1.8 seconds, the model changes from the standpoint of when you first introduce a product to the market and what you need for a retail or a service facility. It changes drastically over the course of a short period of time, where, for example, in the US, and it's happening with the other EV manufacturers as well, they initially go into a retail high-end mall, have a showroom that serves well to introduce the product to the market. But with some companies, it doesn't take long until there's more cars in the parking lot to look at than there are in the showroom that fit that category. So once that shift changes, then the model changes more to a standard auto dealership, where you have sales, service, and delivery all in one particular location. So where that makes sense is that certainly from the standpoint initially, you may be looking for a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot showroom, which then if your product is successful, then you're looking for a 40 or 50,000 square foot auto dealership on the main drag. So
I see. So
And so,
are they typically short-term leases on the front end? Is that one of the strategies?
well, what happens and it's kind of I'm now working with another V manufacturer, and what's the toughest part, at least in the US and also internationally, is the zoning as it relates to auto sales and service and delivery. Most municipalities in the US require a 6 to 8 month leeway to get a conditional use permit for that use, which is expensive and time consuming. So even to do a short-term lease, short-term in most cases is about 5 years. So, but you also want to have the flexibility, to expand rapidly as well. So becomes kind of it is kind of a secret sauce on determining how big a space that you want to open and how long you want that lease term to be. Now, a number of the locations, once they stabilize in a regular kind of an automotive dealership type of format, then you'll see them out on the leased investment market. So there are a number of leased investments currently on the market that have the manufacturers as the tenant, and those tend to be at least 10 years in length. So
Gotcha. Well, you sort of explained something that most consumers don't think about, including me, is the whole notion of auto row. That cities and municipalities do tend to cluster those car dealerships, apparently because of the nature of the use.
yeah, and it's direct to consumer, quite frankly, is not a huge fan amongst the dealership models. So we run into situations where the dealers in a particular, or even the legislatures in certain municipality, don't allow direct to consumer auto sales, but require it to go through a dealership model. And that's for the most part, including 3 or 4 of the newer EV manufacturers that are in the marketplace. That's not their model. They don't go to a dealership model. They don't have an independent dealer sell their cars. They sell them directly to the consumer in most cases through the internet or that type of format. So there's a surmountable, amount of discord, I would say, among some of the traditional dealers about having somebody being able to go into the market and sell directly to the consumer.
Got it. Now, I've read about this a little bit, Doug. Is this a statewide mandate? So in other words, from my understanding, there are certain states that do require the dealership model. So are those just markets that you just don't go in?
Yeah, I wish I didn't know all of this through the absolute battle scars that you learn when you're going through this process, because the executive committees in most major corporations don't like to hear excuses as to why you can't open a specific location within a time frame that they've set out. And so what I will say is that not only is it limited sometimes by the states, but sometimes it even gets granular to the districts and to the counties and to the cities that have their own sense of zoning and what tasks need to be accomplished in order to gain. And I think the big showstopper is always the state, because it has to deal with sales tax revenue and things like that. But there are municipalities that in throughout the United States that the collective dealerships have band together with legislature and made it virtually impossible, either directly or indirectly through zoning, to open a new car sales location. So
Understood. Well, good to know the lobbying industry is still intact and doing its work. Whether you like its work or not, that's another matter. This is a little off topic, but related, might be interesting to listeners. Is I asked a smart person about the whole reshoring trend and a lot of the EV manufacturing, the battery plants themselves. The question was, why are they going to places like Ohio and North Carolina and Florida? And the short answer was, those are really, kind of right to work states where there are fewer ordinances and laws, and it's just more business friendly. Would you back that up? Would you agree with that assessment?
yeah, to a certain degree, but I think that the bigger issue as it relates to manufacturing, especially something as intense, and this is not trade secrets because this is throughout the whole industry. The biggest and most challenging aspect of getting a plant up and operational is the power and infrastructure that's in place. So some of the areas that have been good locations for the manufacturing of EVs or their batteries or their components have been areas that have in the past had heavy industrial uses. And so, because of just the power grid, I mean, California is just an absolute nightmare as it relates to trying to get something up and operational that has a significant power draw. The electrical grid's tapped out. It can take some of the, and I won't pick on any particular municipality, but it can take some of the municipalities 24 to 36 months to get through the approval process to increase the power at a location. So those are other items that become battle fatigues, from the standpoint.
Sure.
But yeah, no, so geographics, I think the labor pool's really important. I mean, one of our competitors does a really good job of doing basically all of the secret sauce that creates the best environment to at least open one of these manufacturing facilities. So you've got to have a talented and willing labor pool. You've got to have the power, and quite frankly, depending on what you're manufacturing, you have to be close to a port, or at least the rail systems to, when you get them, what do you do with them? That's the other aspect of it.
So there's quite a matrix to site selection, in other words.
Yeah, and we have there are consultants in our industry that you can spend several $1,000,000 having them come up with a name out of a hat as to the best location for your manufacturing facility. So
that's one way to do it. This is more inside baseball for anyone from the San Francisco Bay Area, where we are both in or relatively close to. Mare Island, I was working for Cushman & Wakefield back in the late 90s when that was a shuttered naval base, I believe, and there was a effort to reopen it for big industry. Has that really materialized? And what about the power component related to Mare Island?
It's very interesting, because that's, as a matter of fact, with one of my quests here in Northern California to find a location that had the power and had the infrastructure in place. We looked really seriously. This is for a different organization, an organization that is in the rocket industry. But we did look at Mare Island and some specific locations because of the power and so forth. Unfortunately, and certainly some of the areas like Mare Island in the Bay Area, and we'll get, from the standpoint of former naval bases and formal military facilities, the biggest issue worldwide, or at least in the United States, is some of the just hazardous materials that were left in the process of manufacturing whatever they manufactured when they did. So we're dealing with, groundwater contamination, things along those lines that, everyone's doing what they can to clean up, but in the short order, nobody wants to have the responsibility of something that's already existing. And then, there's asbestos and all types of other aspects of the manufacturing facilities that were utilized in the construction of those buildings at the time they were built. So
got it. We could do a whole podcast and with a host of different people to talk about what you never thought you would learn growing up being a commercial real estate broker, right?
I can go on for hours about butterflies. So yeah, no, I mean, especially being from California, I think it's all good intended and good intentions and so forth. But yeah, the smallest of details can create months and months of delays.
Got it. Wow. Well, as a reminder to people that look at men and women like you that succeed in commercial real estate, and they think it's so easy, right? And what little do they know? Well, good stuff. Well, Doug, let's talk about some of your multi-market deals with other NAI offices. Kind of where were they? What kind of product types were involved? I.e., again, retail offices, industrial properties. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we started. I mean, the glamour aspect of this, and I think it's really important to set the glamour level real high on the inception point with working on these deals, was to find 15 or 20 parking spots in downtown San Francisco. That's was the genesis of all of the business that followed. The reason I bring that up is because sometimes some of those locations that we would need to find something as simple as parking for is not sometimes the best received referral from an outside broker to come in and say, hey, I need a place to park 15 cars temporarily in downtown Manhattan. Tedious and horrible and the last thing you want. But the good news out of that is that those did roll into multi-state transactions across the board. So from the standpoint of some of the retail and quite frankly, I need to mention, Gary, that we're currently seeking these sites for another automobile manufacturer nationwide. So we are starting at square, rolling through the same process, which is retail, mall type of locations, service locations up to 15, 20,000 square feet. And then what comes later is the logistics locations. But to speak about some of the areas that we've done work all throughout the state of California, we just closed a deal up with some folks in Oregon, multiple opportunities to work on properties in the Hawaiian Islands, Alaska, everywhere on the West Coast. In Florida, we were extremely for the NAI members in Florida that helped us open locations, logistics locations, energy locations with warehousing and things along those lines. And worldwide, we did a lot of work in Asia, specifically with Korea. We did some work in India, but India has its own set of issues as it relates to import, export, and legal issues. So, you'll have to tap me. I'll go on and on forever. So
no, I got you. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the retail requirements. In part is, among other things, I moderate a retail council call with NAI Global, and I made a note to mention it to that group because if you are a broker and you're listening to this conversation, you probably want to call Doug Sharpe to see what you can do to connect with him and do some business, because there's business to do. We'll get to your phone number at the end, by the way, Doug. So if anyone is listening, they do want to call you, we'll make it easy for that. You also mentioned, I think, when we did a warm up for this podcast, that you've done some work with Fred Meyer and the corporate services. It's kind of connected to what you already described, i.e. multiple different offices. But if there's anything particular that was helpful from that point of view, we'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, so one of the things that's really important is some people become experts on a product type. Some people become experts on graphical locations and or industries where they become the expert in an industry. My whole career has been based on the one source and one source only, and that's the relationships with people that are in the business. So I think certainly from the standpoint of Fred's team, I know I just completed a deal, with, and I'm sick to draw the blank here, but at any rate, where your clients really need to be treated professionally and not based on the size or the scope or the amount of money that the commissions are involved in a transaction, but the importance that they are. And I think throughout our NAI network, especially with the corporate service folks, is that they really do understand that it's the relationship that you're trying to, that's most important, not the transaction size and so forth. So far throughout the system, I haven't really run into many issues with anybody in the NAI world. And of course, I came from CB Richard Ellis, where I did tenant rep work for major corporations. And I would say that we exceed the level of professionalism that I had with that organization when I refer something to a specific location within our system. So
that's quite a testimonial. So thank you for that. And hats off to Fred and his team. They do a great job. Curious, Doug, and relationships, as you mentioned, it's at the very core of this industry. Do you hop on a plane very often, or are you able to do a lot of it from Silicon Valley? You've been doing a lot of traveling, or how's that work out?
My bags are packed and I'm heading to Los Angeles in about an hour. Yeah, no, I am not shy to jump on a plane and, at least to do the initial meet and greet with the clients in the marketplaces. Sometimes it's horrible. I have to go to Hawaii multiple times for business.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrible. But there are some, I don't want to offend anybody in our listening audiences, but there are some places at certain times of the year that you think twice about, but you end up going to. So, and certainly from the standpoint of, being a road warrior and things like that, you don't really, at least from my perspective, I don't need to go on every trip, but I do need to at least put boots on the ground initially, just to show my level of commitment to the client that I'm on board and will assist in any way that I possibly can throughout the process.
Awesome. We'll start calling you Platinum Member Sharpe. All right. So jokes aside, your work in EVs, has it led to some other related work, i.e. battery manufacturing or other kinds of things like that, Doug? Because, that's always something that other brokers are curious about. When you succeed in one lane, does it lead to other things? And then, of course, there's the conflict of, you can't work for Pepsi and Coke at the same time, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So, and we're transitioning out of the business that we were doing with the publicly traded firm, although the other firm that we're working with just announced their IPO, and so they'll be public in a couple months. But absolutely. So certainly from the standpoint of the energy sustainability, that those are things, I know, buzzwords that everyone throws around, but I have to tell you that there is kind of a real quiet environmentalist part of me that is absolutely thrilled to death when I can take a look at how much the carbon footprint I have been involved with in eliminating throughout this process, including the battery manufacturing, because batteries, they are now integrated into our grid. So the battery systems are now integrated into the environmental grid or the energy grid, so that when your power goes out in certain parts of California, it switch turns and the batteries power the grid. So that type of stuff. I know in Hawaii that's the case, that they've just ended their last coal-fired plant and now are utilizing batteries. So to answer the question, absolutely. And two levels. Number one, it rolls into all types of other energy efficiency and solar and battery work that you can do. And then from the standpoint of rolling out new EV companies where they're starting it at the beginning, just having the experience of having gone through that process, it creates an opportunity to introduce somebody else to the industry. But yeah, no, absolutely. Relationship wise, people move within the organizations. And just recently, we did a fairly successful transaction with a rocket manufacturer, putting rockets into orbit and with satellite payloads. And so if I knew nothing about electric vehicles when I started in batteries, believe me, I even knew less about spaceports and rocket launching. So that from that sport, they may not seem like they're identical, but a lot of the technology that is going to earth science and helping the environment is also being led by some of the satellite companies that are monitoring, the global warming and so forth.
Fascinating, and good to hear that you have an appreciation for your contribution to the betterment of Mother Earth and all that kind of good stuff. I mean, it's this is not about me, but I built a house and I put solar on it, and I get my electric statement and it says I saved 14 trees this last month. I kind of love that stuff, so I get it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and then also I got to tell you that, I mean, just being self-serving from the standpoint of having a solar roof and solar power and battery backup. I mean, there's nothing like watching the football game while your whole neighborhood's dark. So that has probably done more for solar and battery sales than anything, at least in Northern California, where we had the wildfires and the grid goes offline often. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned you worked for CBRE or with CBRE. What were some of the other companies in your 30-year career that you've worked with, Doug?
Yeah, so I was part of the NAI group when they were NAI BT Commercial. That group then rolled into Cushman Wakefield, a series of other stops, but ultimately ended up at Cushman and Wakefield in the Bay Area. And I think nationally too. I was a victim of the Grubb and Ellis fallout and bankruptcy. And it was at that point that I reached out to an acquaintance that I have in NAI in New York and asked him, hey, I needed a lifeboat. Is there a spot that I can jump on? And that was over 10 years ago. And it was the best seat on the lifeboat I could possibly get.
I'd say, look at you going from lifeboat to top producer in 10 years. Way to go.
Yeah, no.
That's awesome. Speaking of which, do you work with a team, or are you pretty much a soloist? Because you're a busy person. How do you get all this done?
Yeah, so and it's kind of an interesting. It's interesting because I have also. I mean, this sounds like altruism here. Seriously, I'm totally taking advantage of it. Most of the people who have worked with me I'll start them as an assistant, mandate that they get their real estate license, and then they become a party on the team, have been women. And the reason for that is that there are so few women in commercial real estate that I always thought that was a neat way to do it. The good part about it is that I've trained a lot of people who have gone on to do other things. The bad part about it is that right about 3 years in, the recruiters know to call the people who are assisting me and to give them key positions at corporate real estate positions internally. So we have people that I've worked with that end up at Facebook, Apple, I can probably say at Tesla, at rocket companies, at Microsoft, and so forth. So the good news is that some of my corporate service clients have done a really good job of training people who are now leaders in the corporate real estate world. So
It's good for you for doing a lot of mentoring. Hopefully you can benefit from the effort, because it is quite an effort. I've done some of that work myself, and there's some emotional commitment as well as just pure time, obviously. So, well, let's look ahead, really kind of wrapping up our call. It's 2023 is around the corner. What does your world look like from a business perspective next year? Is there anything threatening from this threat of recession, or the cost of money, the interest rate spike? Is any of that impacting your business?
yeah, well, so I was in New York. I sat in with Sam Zell, who was with Equity Office and has his own real estate billion-dollar fund. And he is always so, I want to say he's always so about things. And I'm joking when I say that, but he says right now liquidity is key, that we're heading into some pretty troubling times over the course of the next probably 24 to 36 months. So we're starting to see a little bit of that in Silicon Valley as it relates to the amount of people who are not going back to the offices. So, I'm sitting in downtown San Jose surrounded by empty office building and with new ones coming out of the ground. So there is some concern as it relates to where things are gonna go over the course of the next 24 months. We're seeing indecision from the corporate leadership or from the business teams, where we want to expand has now turned into, well, let's take another look at this and see if we want to expand or whether we want to reduce our footprint. On the other side, I'm just seeing such huge demand from the medical community. So we're all as a nation getting older, and we're starting to see a lot of the medical groups really start to step out and do some things that they haven't done in the past. So, and technology, having done this in Silicon Valley, technology always is the game changer. So as soon as somebody comes up with a new gizmo, it'll just catch the world on fire again. So I hope that kind of answers it, Gary. I'm kind of
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're concerned about, what's going on, and the nature of cycles. There's an up, there's a down, there's a sideways. So we're going into something. It'll be different. Well, we could probably go on for a long time, Doug, but we are limited to some time. I really appreciate you taking the time. Again, listeners, we've been speaking with Doug Sharpe with NAI NorCal in the Silicon Valley office. And if you wish to reach Doug, his direct line, I'm not sure if you want me to give the mobile out, Doug. So why don't you provide the number you'd like to be called on?
Yeah, sure. The direct line to the office, it rolls to my mobile as well, is 408-740-7224. And that's in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world, depending on where. I would say it's like the fire department, Gary. The bell rings and I go running. So,
Well, that's the nature of your job. Well, Doug, thanks so much for talking with us. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you at the next convention, hopefully in February in Las Vegas.
you got it. Thanks so much. Thanks for your time. Thank you. Bye now.